This is the Rich Report, bringing you the richest content across entertainment. And boy, was Sunday anything other than entertaining. My name is Cameron Richardson. Joining me today, Johnny Crane. Johnny wrote the recap and preview, did all sorts of coverage for us of the Coca-Cola 600. Now, the longest race in NASCAR history in terms of mileage, 607.5 miles, and boy, did it feel like that long. Johnny, how are you doing today?
Cameron, it's 12:38 a.m. here in Montrose, Colorado. 7+ hours of live tweeting, recapping, etc. It can be a grind at times. It can be frustrating, but I do love doing it. So I got nothing to complain about.
We are starting this thing late. I'm recording this at 11:38 at night because not only did we have just a long race, we had an hour-long rain delay to go with 600 plus miles of racing. And then after the race, we get Jimmy Johnson, who fails post-race inspection because it was a body sort of failure that they had. And now it doesn't look like they'll be able to appeal it. And Johnson finishes 40th instead of his second place finish since 2015. Really had a solid start to the season, but now after today's race, falls from 11th to 15th in points and gets nothing out of today after what could have been a big day for Team Hendrick. We'll get into that later. But Johnny, first off, I want your just overall reaction to the racing today, because it practically wasn't any racing at all. Very little that we got under green flag conditions where we weren't undergoing green flag pit stops. You couldn't pass on the track. Once you had clean air, once you got into the lead, it was practically you were going to stay in that position for the remainder of the race. It would take a driver having a slip up in the turns and having to get off the gas for you to at least make a run. But that was few and far between. And once somebody had the lead, it was practically game over from there. Kurt Busch, before the rain delay, started on the pole, led the first 50 laps. Then after the rains came, Bowman took over for a while, and then Chase Elliott as well. But if you were running, as long as you were in the top five, you were going to finish in the top five unless you made a mistake. Wherever your position was, whether you'd be 30th or first, that's where you're going to be during these long green flag runs. One groove racing. So let's break it down here. All right. You want one groove racing? Fine. At least you're going to have guys try to move each other to get that positioning. But no, with this aero package, with the expanded spoiler for this aero package, the high downforce aero package, once you get in someone's wake, your car is going to stall out and you're not going to be able to make a run on them. Instead of being, if you're a tenth behind them and right on their bumper, you're going to drop 3 or 4 tenths because your car stalls out in the wake in that draft, and it does no good for the product on track. Everybody wants closer racing, but this doesn't provide closer racing. It just delivers train practically. This is easily the worst race I've watched with this package since the 2 Michigan races last year. Johnny, your thoughts on the racing tonight?
Well, when you add weather into the fact, and when you add the longest race ever by mileage into the fact, and you add to the fact that, like you said, it's pretty much single file racing throughout the entire race, it really makes for a not as entertainment product that one would hope, not only as an expert NASCAR fan like yourself, but also to the casual fan. The casual fans that NASCAR is actually trying to bring more on board and to get more publicity for the sport. And even though the Coke 600 is a really big event, it didn't really have the entertainment value or really the pure racing value that was thought coming in. And the product that we got was, like you said, single file, no passing, a train. Pretty much pit strategy was the big one. That was pretty much the only excitement, close to excitement, that was there, whether you were going to do 4 wheels or 2 wheels in the pit stops. But other than that, The top 10 for the final 45, 50 laps stayed stagnant the entire time. All the cautions wasn't really wrecking, and really you don't want, I'm not advocating for wrecking, but there really wasn't any excitement in the passing, which could create more aggressiveness, which could cause wrecking to happen. So it was a really stale product. It was pretty, it wasn't what I thought it would be. And when you add again the weather into the fact and so on, it really elongated the race than what it probably actually was. And it's a shame that COVID and stuff that's out of our control has happened, because the next gen car is now being delayed an extra year, which means we'll have the same package next year as well.
Yeah, it's a unfortunate shame, but I at least was expecting some sort of a quality race. If you go back to last year's was pretty fun throughout the entire race. Granted, there were a ton more cautions. It was a lot hotter, which meant that the good old PJ1 traction compound that's supposed to create more grip and create that second lane, granted artificially, that came in at points last year, and it made it slick. It made the track a lot slicker. It made for more entertaining racing. But with the cold conditions and the rains hitting, the track never really warmed up, and it would have taken probably another 100 laps after the final stage to even get it completely working. Because you could see some drivers are sort of working it in towards the finish. That would be where Chase Elliott and Brad ran for a majority going into before overtime. But yeah, I don't know why NASCAR decided to put it down, but it did not equate to better racing. It was by far in a landslide the worst race of 2020. And we've had some great races this year. They weren't just good. We haven't had a bad race this year, but this Coke 600, this grand jewel of a race, by far the worst we've had in 2020.
I agree. I mean, the crown jewel, this is one of the big races. And again, this goes back to NASCAR wanting to really put the sport more on the map more. And to put the sport more on the map, you really have to hit a home run with these crown jewels. And even though it wasn't a complete with a swing and a miss, it definitely wasn't a home run either. And the product that was out there, even though there's stuff that's out of our control, fans aren't there and so on, it still wasn't the product that you, or others thought it would be.
Yeah, and speaking of just poor performances, not the Hendrick Motorsports. They can't find they always find a way to shoot themselves in the foot. It's been a trend this week. Granted, Chase Elliott last week was none of his fault. Kyle Busch turned him, and we all know he did. But this team has found a way. They've had the best car on these 1.5s week in and week out, and they cannot produce a solid finish. They should have all finished in the top 10 in this race, but only Chase Elliott was able to with his second place. Jimmy Johnson finishes last because he was disqualified after failing post-race inspection. Alex Bowman had a really awful restart to overtime and wound up 19th. He was last of the lead lap cars in the unofficial results after the race ended. And then William Byron, with 2 to go, blows a tire, which leads to Chase Elliott and his crew chief, Alan Gustafson, making the call to come down pit road. We've seen this before. The same exact thing happened at Las Vegas with Ryan Blaney and Alex Bowman both deciding to come down pit road and take tires when there's only going to be 2 laps of racing. And especially, okay, maybe with the older package with low downforce, you could probably get a run on the outside and gain a couple of positions at least. But I still don't think, regardless of the aero package that's going on, you're really not going to make up all that ground with such a short time left in the race. So I really don't know what the plan really is when you come down pit road. Chase Elliott had no business coming down pit road. Luckily, he was still able to finish second, but once again, just like Blaney and Bowman, who finished outside of the top 10 at Las Vegas in February, this still didn't equate to a win. So I'm really confused of why these guys still choose to come down pit road when, especially in a race where there's no passing, decide to come down pit road anyway.
Right. And to hit on the Hendrick thing real quick, it's a very interesting scenario because not only were all four Hendrick drivers in the top 10, at one point all four were in the top six. They started the races really strong. Elliott has three stage wins on the year. Bowman won two tonight. He was really, really, really good at Auto Club, and he won that race with flying colors. But they've shot themselves in the foot. Like you said, Byron blew a tire. Johnson was DQ'd. And with Elliott, the pit road, arguably, it's possible that Elliott could have had two straight wins. And now the Kyle Busch thing was out of his control. There's nothing he could have done to prevent that. But if that didn't happen and he just stuck with his car and stuck with his guts and didn't go down pit road, and he probably could have gotten away with not going down pit road because that car was going really good there at the end. And I don't know if you saw Cameron, but when Elliott was going down pit road, Keselowski was also turning to go, but then he turned back out.
Yeah,
So,
from what I heard, the plan was for Brad to do the exact opposite of Chase Elliott. If Elliott was coming down, Brad was staying out. If Chase stayed out, Brad was coming in. So, granted, Chase made the decision for Brad, but Brad still had some sort of intention to come down. I'm sorry, if I'm in the top five, I'm not coming in. I'd rather take my chances, especially with the lack of passing today, and see what happens. I'm really not a fan of taking that risk. Maybe with 15, 20 to go, okay, maybe you give yourself a chance because they're gonna fade sooner or later. And we saw that. We didn't see that with Bowman early on in the race, but we did see that with Matt DiBenedetto when he decided to stay on the two tire strategy. Yeah, but outside of the pit strategy, there really was nothing else exciting about this race. And Hendrick shooting themselves in the foot just creates a bigger hole for this race because there's a lot of Hendrick fans out there that are disappointed in how their drivers finished today.
right. And they've arguably, if they could get a little more, if they could just finish those races, because like I said, they've done really well in the early part of the stages, but they haven't been able to have a complete race from start to finish. And they can really clean that up. They're a pretty big team to be reckoned with, as you really don't have just one driver out of the four that has championship aspirations. You could make a case that all four could make a pretty deep run if the cars are as fast as they've been, at least through the first seven races this year. So the pit crew issues, the disqualification issues with Johnson, it's a shame, but it's early on. Maybe stuff gets changed. Hopefully, they can hope because the cars are just too talented and they're just too good to do this consistently. But we'll see.
Looking at some of the results today, Brad, of course, picks up his first win of the season, first since the Kansas race last May. Chase Elliott second. Ryan Blaney finally got a good run with a third place run today. Kyle Busch fourth, and Kevin Harvick 7 for 7 in top tens, finishes fifth. And he had a pretty poor run. Granted, it was probably due to not being able to pass anyone. Had a poor qualifying run. He still found a way to finish fifth. Ryan Truex Jr. also had a great run today, wound up sixth, so I think he's going to be a little bit disappointed in that. Kurt Busch seventh. Tyler Reddick 3 top tens in his 9 Cup starts. I am very impressed by what that rookie has done. Finally, Christopher Bell with his breakthrough performance of the year, getting his first top 10 of 2020. We expected big things from him early on. He has not delivered yet, but now maybe this could be the momentum he needs going on later into the season and into the summer. Chris Buescher, instead of finishing 11th, racks up his second top 10 of 2020, finishing 10th today. Some disappointing runs. Was there a specific driver that stood out to you today that did not perform the way they should have?
Did not perform the way they should have. Where did Benedetto finish again?
He finished 17th.
So we've been waiting for DiBenedetto to really take off, not only this season, but also in the past seasons. He only has 2 top 10s in his career at the Cup Series level. You've seen him start high. You've seen him be within the top 10, but it goes back to sort of the issue that the Hendrick racers are having. You know, they're starting off okay in certain spots, but they're not able to elongate that and expand that through the whole race. And, you know, he was pretty risky. He's been taking risks. I'll give him that. You know, he did the 2-tire pit stop, which put him in first, vaulted him up 13 spots into the first position at the latter end of the stage. But other than that, he still hasn't been able to really cap into that top 5 finish or that big time finish yet that we've been waiting for. So the top 10 for today, there's been some disappointment. Sure, we've looked for Bell to be a little bit better, arguably, sure. But I think that with beyond the top 10, the Benedettos of the world, I think those are the ones that I was expecting a little bit more from. I mean, again, it's early. We're only 7 races in, but it's a little bit of an issue that I think definitely needs to be corrected for that car to be as good as some people thought it would eventually be.
Yeah, and we forgot to mention this. We should have mentioned this at the beginning of the episode. Denny Hamlin having a ballast from the bottom of his car come off as they were making their warm-up laps. And in case anybody didn't know, this is a heavy piece of metal that came off the car. It could really do some damage for anybody that hits it. Denny Hamlin would come back down pit road, get it fixed up, and the night was pretty much over for him. Would go multiple laps down, still wound up in the top 30 and 29. But this could lead to a total disaster for the next month because he loses his crew chief and Chris Gabehart and will lose the car chief and an engineer as well. So a big loss for that team. Johnny, how do you think losing your crew chief will affect Hamlin as we move on the next month, especially when we go to places like Bristol? We have the next Charlotte race coming up, and then we go to Homestead.
Well, the good thing for Hamlin, if there is one good thing out of this, is that he is already locked into the playoffs. He already has 2 wins this year. Somehow, he already has 2 wins. So he can sort of play with house money a little bit and sort of work his way through the dog days of the racing season as it continues, and that includes the 4 races that he will be without his chief and so on. However, with those big races coming up, it's still going to be a communication issue because now you don't have those big guys to really tell you what to do, to come into the pits, to stay out of the pits, like an Elliott situation. So it'll be really interesting to see how he improves and how he's able to move past the lack of a crew chief that he has for the next 4 races. The good news for him is that he didn't lose playoff points. He didn't get completely disqualified. He didn't lose any points at all. So that's a good thing. But for the fact that the tungsten, which is the metal that came out, just dumped out of the car, that's not, like you said, that's really dangerous, and it's just odd. It's a very odd thing to happen to the car. And, without the engineer and such for the next 4 races, will that problem be alleviated fully? Who knows?
Yep. So coming up, we got 3 more days of racing. Tomorrow night, we have the Xfinity Series at Charlotte. They're all at Charlotte. We have the truck race on Tuesday, and then we wrap this thing up with the second cup race at Charlotte. It will be on the oval, not on the Roval. Don't get them confused. We will still have the Roval race in the playoffs. So we will be back Wednesday night. We'll wrap all 3 of those races up. Johnny, you down for it?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it. Like I said, anytime you want me on, just shoot me a text. I'll be on for you.
It sounds good. If you prefer a written recap, Johnny has that. I will put that in the description box. Thanks for watching. As always, make sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you Wednesday night following the cup race. Thanks for watching.